Come on, zoom in. We're live at 7:33. So I'm a little late. Got a fresh cold beverage, iced tea, always good. It's hot. We're airs. I got fan going. But today I want to talk about 4.6 modular 2-valve stuff. And again, like always, this carries over to other stuff that we would want to be focused on, particularly, guys that have other guys' stuff, because let's face it, we all don't have LS stuff. We all don't have small block Chevy, or even small block Ford, or even big block Chevy, or even as we trickle down into whatever the size of the markets are as they get smaller and smaller and smaller. So in some instances, if you're going to have some kind of performance deal, you almost have to make it. So for those guys, and if the 4.6 2-valve guys did not enjoy the same, like the aftermarket industry didn't embrace the 2-valve the way that it did the 5-liter Mustang. I mean, how many small block Ford heads were there, for the 5-liter? And obviously that carried over to the 289s and 351s and all those too. But how many aftermarket heads were there? I know I tested probably 25 or 30 different ones. So there were a lot. I don't know if there's still that many, but there were a lot. How many aftermarket 4.6 2-valve heads were there? There's one company making them. And it wasn't from lack of trying on my part. I did lots and lots of then stories and videos also on trying to convince people that this is a good idea. Look, they made millions of these 4.6 2-valves. You need to be somebody needs to be the only game in town. It's not an easy deal to make an overhead cam aftermarket head like that. But Brian Tooley from Brian Tooley Racing stepped up and did that when he was working with those guys. So it's an impressive deal. But having one head, maybe they have it in two different chamber sizes or something, and you could count as many heads as you want. But we don't have trick flow and airflow research and Dart and Promax and Skip White and whoever all the other people are. Brodex. I don't want to leave out the Brodex guys. They make excellent stuff. But we don't have all those manufacturers doing stuff for the 4.6 2-valve, but that doesn't mean that there aren't things for that. I mean, you can, and I went through all this because when I was doing this and when I wrote that book that I did on modular Fords, there weren't any aftermarket heads. And so we did it all with ported stock heads. And there was lots of guys offering, good ported stock heads. The guys from Total Engine Airflow at the time with Brian. Those work really well. You can make the stock ones better, as you might imagine, because, the stock one is the stock one. It wasn't designed for maximum flow. And if they left some material there, good guys can do what they do to make it better. We could see if we could fit bigger valves in there and port it out and do all that and make more power. Naturally, almost right away, the guys from Comp Cams jumped in and made camshafts for it. And so there were at least some aftermarket cams available. Because as we know, even though they had non-PI and PI versions, and the PI versions had higher lift cams, they still weren't really performance cams. I mean, they didn't have the duration that we would normally associate with, getting the thing to make power at higher engine speeds and make more power, because factory cams are never about power production. They're about lots of other things. They're about making whatever power they need to make for their application. But it's longevity and cost and, all sorts of things that go into making the factory OEM cam. But, and then a few, excuse me, a few intake manifolds also kind of, came into play there with the 4.6 2-valve. It was not an easy deal because of the way that the port entry was on the head. I know, because I did a couple of different intake manifolds. Both PI and non-PI versions, super Ritchie versions, adjustable runners and things like that. And I made a fixed runner version for the 2-valve and for the 4-valve, or for the 3-valve. I don't think I did a fixed one. I didn't do a fixed runner one, like a finished intake manifold, like that, one that fit on the hood where you could attach all the things to it. I didn't do that for the 4-valve, either the early or the late 4-valve. but did for the other two. But at any rate, there were a number of different intake manifolds, and they are the kinds of things that you would normally see. There were some short runner ones like their Riker Racing deal. The P51 was around back then. Trickflow obviously came out with an intake manifold. Edelbrock eventually came out with a couple for theirs. In fact, I haven't ever run the Victor series manifold. I've never tested one of those for a 462 valve. I suspect, given looking at it and having tested, 50 or 100 other single plane manifolds, including the Sullivan manifold for the 4 valve, that it's going to do what we would kind of expect for those. But having it make, power at a higher RPM, I did a dual plenum deal for the 2 valve with adjustable runners on it. That worked very well, depending on where you wanted your power. But the one thing I have to say is that in looking at that motor, even though there was some support for it, even on motors where there's even less support for it, but there's always boost. and that, in fact, that could be our pole. I got to make sure I didn't have a pole the last time. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you owned a 462 valve motor, would you just run boost? The nice thing about that, and I ran, we ran boost on, I'm trying to think back, a number of different combinations. We ran boost on stock motors, just kind of bone stock ones. We ran boost on modified version, heads, cam, intake. We ran boost on, kind of built ones that had forge draws and forged pistons and stuff. Man, I never took one of the 462 valves out to maximum deal with the modified hybrid deal that we did with a non-PI short block and then ported PI heads and cams and intake manifold. I think we ran it up to 650 or 700 or something with the stock stuff. And that worked pretty good, especially considering I don't think that I put, when we were running boost on all that stuff, we did it with a centrifugal blower and we did it with a Kenny Bell. And I don't think I put ring gap in those. I don't know where it was. It was a high mileage motor. And so I know a lot of guys will say, oh, it's high mileage. It's already broken the rings in for you. I know on an LS that has not been true. I haven't taken apart enough 462 valves to know how much they wear the rings and the bore, relatively speaking with mileage. The LS doesn't seem to do that. I've taken apart a lot of them, dozens of them, and measured ring gap on them. And you don't see any ridge at the top of these motors that have 100 or even 200,000 miles or more. There's no ridge at the top like there is on a small block Chevy. The bore hasn't worn. And then when we check the rings, a lot of times with these things that have 200,000 or more, the ring gap is still in the teens. I don't know if that's the case on the 462 valve. I would like to say that it had added ring gap, but having never checked it, I'm in the same position that a lot of guys are, where I just don't know. I do know that we made a lot of runs, 40 or 50 runs, I'm sure, under boost, and we didn't ever have a problem, but that doesn't mean anything. That just means that we got lucky and had a good tune, and we're making, short blasts for the dyno thing and good gas, and it all worked out. But the point is you can always just add boost. So whether you have a Slant 6 or an AMC or a Buick or Cadillac or whatever it is, even if there's not lots of stuff available for it, you can always port the stock head. If there's not a bunch of aftermarket aluminum heads, there's almost certainly going to be cams. And even if there's not, you can regrind the stock cams and then, change the base circle and adjust for that. Port the stock heads, some sort of aftermarket cam. Hopefully there's some kind of intake manifold. But again, If there's not, you can port the stock one. And the nice thing is that if you add boost, if you add turbo or centrifugal blower, roots blower, whatever it is, the intake manifold will be less of an issue. You know, it still comes into play, but if the intake manifold is restrictive from an airflow standpoint, adding boost to it kind of changes that. It kind of cures that. Certainly in the realistic RPM and power range. So the nice thing is if we add boost on a whatever it is, you know, a 403 Pontiac motor or what is that? A Buick Pontiac Olds? I think that's an Oldsmobile motor on the 6.6 Trans Ams. If you did something like that, or a 301 turbo Pontiac, and you add boost, you just increase it in multiples of whatever is there. So you can get a 50% gain, and that's 50% gain is still a 50% gain. You would notice whether it doesn't matter what you're starting with, you would notice a 50% gain in power. And so it doesn't matter if we're talking about like a 100 horsepower Civic or like the Metro, a 40 horsepower Metro, and we add 20 to it. You're going to notice that because a 50% power gain is a lot. And so just adding boost to something, you can easily get gains like that, no matter what it is. You know, a Metro or a Pontiac, a Trans Am, whatever, any of those things, and certainly the 462 valve. We ran boost on a lot of them. When we ran the stock stuff, we had boosted stock 462 valves that were in the low to mid 400 horsepower range, and some of them that were in the 500 horsepower range. Some of them were in the 600 horsepower range. It's just pretty easy to get, you just raise the boost and you can get lots of power. And on modified ones, we got even more. And so you could make lots of power. We put a Vortec on one, put the Kenny Bell on it. And as you might expect, ported heads, cam, boost, you got all sorts of magic there, making lots of power. And the nice thing is the factory made some, the factory and Celine at the time made some, factory or quasi factory blower things. And the only thing better than having an NA version is having something with boost. And this is when I was doing this, when we were doing the 462 valve stuff. That was back when the guys from HP Performance were in full swing, and so we did a lot of testing with their kits and stuff. And you could see in the thumbnail that the turbos are mounted like kind of up to either side of the bumper, up kind of in the front fascia area. And I remember looking at that thinking, oh, that's way too far away, the turbo response. And then after seeing what it did, I'm like, yeah, it's fine. It's getting boost. It's doing all the things it likes, and it's all full of boosty goodness, and it's all good. But that's what happens when you're an expert and you know everything instead of learning everything. And that's one of the situations where I thought that's going to be way too laggy. As it turned out, that was not the case. Particularly when you run, it allows you to run stock exhaust manifolds and small tubing and, 2 small turbos like that. They were using like 46 millimeter turbos on those. They actually worked pretty well. We did a lot of testing on the dyno, but also I got to drive some of these cars. And so it was, it's like night and day adding a turbo to anything. It makes a big difference. All of a sudden the thing is like a lot more fun. Prestige, what's going on? Haven't seen you in a while. My 99 Merc had a 4.6 in it, and it would haul the mail. Your modular alarm went off. Your Spidey sense. 4i4 2-valve guy here. Nice. That one, a 4-liter liquid cooled Kenny Bell for $300 in a raffle. Dude, that's $300 well spent, right? Hi. I need to switch to navigator heads. Didn't know if I had to go represent. I have to just open the door. I don't know if it was some kind of salesman. I'm not very nice to the to the door-to-door salespeople. Look, stop. I don't care what you're selling. It would make any difference to me if you're selling gold bars for $5. I'm not interested. It doesn't make any difference what it is. Oh, but I'm not selling anything. I'm just giving you information. No, you're not. You're wasting my time. And that's not going to happen. So let's be real. Ford doesn't stand a chance against an LS. Why? This discussion isn't about which one of those is better. This is about making a 4.6 better, just like we would if we were trying to make a 4.8 better. Ford is jealous that we can make more power with less cubic inches. Trick flow has 2 valve heads. It's easy to add cubic inches on the 4.6 of Y when the other 4.8 V8s are bigger. Four valve is better, 2 valve is cheaper and fits better. Eric, that's good. Congratulations, man. 30 days cigarette free. Lisa, do I need to come down there? Did the Mercury Marauder have a 2 or 3 valve motor? Here's me, the Ford engineers that designed and the engine forgot that they could move the valves around. It had a 4 valve, the Marauder, right? That was like the Cobra motor, right? My wife is way too nice. I would already be done talking to people. We need the 4.6 Big Bang. I agree. I agree on that. A 4.6 2 valve Big Bang would be good. Well, it seems like 15 years ago when you asked about cams, everyone talked about lift. Now it's more duration. Talked about versus power numbers. I don't remember. I don't remember anybody talking about lift because that's not what the conversation would be about on camshafts. So what was the reason the Dominator carb didn't work when you ran it on the inline 6? It did. We went to wide open throttle and we made a run. It's just that it had to go through the Dominator carburetor had to go through the 1 barrel hole on the intake manifold. And so we had to do an adapter from a 1 barrel to a 2 barrel, and then a 2 barrel to a 4500, or 2 barrel to a 4150, and then a 4150 to a 4500, and then run the Dominator. And the signal to that carburetor, the carburetor is very, very big. And so, but it did run. I mean, we made a pull with it. It's just not what you need for, obviously, for that application. I might also get my stock cams reground. My friend autocrossed the Mustang, and he was always complaining if you weren't giving a lot of torque, at least give us some high RPM horsepower. 4.6 at our Big Bang will raise 4.6 prices. I don't see any shortage of 4.6 2 valves in the wrecking yard. There should be a lot of those there. I don't think that they're really sought after like some of the other motors. My 4.6 and my 08 Ford has a new intake, new water pump, heater pipe, NGK plugs. The old plugs are bad. Stock twin bore intake is bigger than 70 millimeters. Will it support 400 horsepower? What's the choke point? Couple things. One, the size of the throttle body doesn't stop making power at some level. It just becomes more and more restrictive with higher and higher power levels. What you have is more depression behind the intake manifold or behind the throttle body. So 400 horsepower, 70 millimeters, if one of them is 70 millimeters, that's more than enough to support 400 horsepower. The question becomes, is the rest of the motor ready to make 400 horsepower? I'm on the fence about building a small block 400 or carb converting my LQ4. given the flow rate of the LQ4 of the heads on that, I would pick that one. Let's see. Vegan mechanic made 270 real horsepower reground cams and everything else bone stock on a factory rated 220 horsepower crank PI 2-valve 2004. So 270 wheel horsepower. It's a pretty good bit. With everything else stock, it seems kind of high. Having run endless amounts of cams in those. O2 GT, we did Gen 2 Coyote rods. He's got COVID again. I've never had COVID, so it would have to be the first time, but that's not it. Off topic, but could this work? AMR 300 compounded to an AMR 500. Panda must tell us the answer. Why would you? I don't understand why you would want two of those. Compounding those two wouldn't do anything. You're not going to have a lack of boost response from a positive displacement blower, so I don't know why you would want to do that. What do you think of 4-valve 4.6 stuff? I did a book on it, so I've done a lot of testing with them. Is the Comp 270 cam good for centrifugal setup? Yes, it is. The Godzilla, the Godzilla Ford engine is like a big LS. What if he's selling 300 order superchargers? Well, not if he's trying to sell me an AMR 500 for 300, then that's not a good deal. I have a 4.6 valve stock, unported heads, custom cams, F1A Pro Charger, Cobra rods and pistons. 570 wheel horsepower. I'm surprised you got anywhere near there with a stock clutch. A cammed 4.6 motor is must be a lot of boost. Wastegate boost reference source, pre-intercooler versus post. Post would be more consistent, but seems most run pre. I always run my wastegate reference line from the intake manifold, not from the turbo and not in the discharge. If you run it in the intake manifold, you'll have the highest boost. Yeah, Eric, even then, even if they're doing their monkey sales pitch, that's not for me. I don't have time. It wouldn't, like I said, it wouldn't make any difference what they have. I'm not interested. I don't do business on my doorstep, not with anybody. The one exception might be Girl Scouts, but we do that at the store anyway, so that's fine. 2-valve with an on-3 kit. Don't know power numbers, but ran 1060s at 123 with a converter. That's definitely too loose for the combo. Made 12 psi on a stock 113,000 mile motor. Okay. Shooting for 500 wheel horsepower, less than 10 pieces. I've run endless amounts of modular Ford stuff. I've run lots of NA stuff. I've run lots of boosted stuff. Let's see. I'll tell you what the so when somebody tells me that they did some magic stuff, I just let the dyno tell me what actually happens. Modular Ford. So here we go. Okay, so we ran a, how much boost is this? 6 pounds. £6 intercooled. Then 9 pounds intercooled. Okay. So on a stock 462 valve, this was a PI motor. 9 pounds made 500 horsepower at the flywheel. And then like 6.5 pounds made 430 horsepower. And then we ran it non-intercooled also at the same boost level, but probably less timing. 393 horsepower. And that's flywheel and not wheel horsepower. So can you run, I don't know how much boost guys are running, but that kind of gives you an idea what stock motors actually do. There's a guy on YouTube working on turbocharging a North Star motor. I know that's been done for years and years and years and years. I mean, guys were using turbo North Star motors in sand rails a lot. I've seen a bunch of them at West Tech in sand rails where guys used to be kind of the go-to motor for a long time. But I think that the Honda is better, but that's been going on a long time. And turbos work the same way. If we have a 300 horsepower motor, then we can have a 600 horsepower motor at 1 bar. There's a 4.4 liter version of the North Star that came factory equipped with a supercharger. Yeah, isn't that the supercharger that I ran on the LS? I did some research on the Truck Norris and Chupacabra cams with many of the values. They practically are both in between an LS3 and an LS9 cam, so technically, basically a stock 6.2 cam. Not anywhere near accurate on that. An LS3 is also a terrible cam. It loses a whole bunch of power down low compared to the factory stuff and compared to a Truck Norris or Chupacabra. And an LS9 loses a ton of power down low, but it makes a pretty good power up top. Going to run about 8 PSI on my non-PI Grand Marquis. Yeah, Cletus is buying a lot of those police cars. I just bought an LH2 North Star engine, and yes, it's sitting in my front foyer. And every time I walk past it, ooh la la, how fancy and French of you. Yeah, Calvin's was doing a North Star. I don't know if he's done it yet, though. North Star Performance makes stuff for the North Star engine. How did you pick your wife? Because you're always on cars, and I've never heard her. Yeah, my wife's awesome. I met her at a family reunion. I always love telling that story. Yeah, plumber, that's Calvin. Here's one for you. I'm building a 2.8 with a turbo, looking for good power in a 1990 Camaro. I've done the 3.1, which I think is similar, but that is other guys, but it will definitely respond to boost. It's amazing how much carbon can be on the 462 valve spark plugs and have it still run. Every month of 20-mile weekend drives, carboned up unbelievably. Got to take it out and burn that carbon off. Is Howard's whatever number that is cam any good? I don't know. I don't know what cam that is. I'm not familiar with all of their cam numbers. I made 250 wheel horsepower with an intake and long tube bearers. So are you talking about an air intake or an intake manifold? With 12 pounds, I made 454 wheel horsepower. That sort of gain relative to the NA power output seems to be about right. I went 905 at 159 back in 2005. Joseph, the two things that you mentioned on the difference between the Romeo and Windsor thing, which is just beyond me. I don't know why they would have two different places building different versions of the same motor, but I don't know of any other difference between those two. Stock clutch was slipping very bad at 500 wheel horsepower. Seems like it would start slipping way before that. 809 wheel horsepower at 22 pounds. Novi 2000. Are you still in contact with David Vizard? I haven't talked to David for a while. When you talk about gapping rings, do you gap all the rings or only certain ones? I only gap the top two rings. I don't do the oil rings, just the top two rings. Richard, you should tune my 464 valve. That's the last thing that you want. I have a Kenny Bell 2.8, 610 wheel horsepower, 93, 18 PSI. What could we get for money? 85. I don't know how much timing you have, but E85 is definitely going to add power. With a Comp 270 cam, is loss of vacuum an issue? Yes, it is. The idle quality is not going to be good with that cam. I had the 274 cams in my car and did not like them. Wish, even to this day, wish that I would have put the 262 cams in it, or that they would have had something smaller than that for driving around, because it lost power through a lot of the curve with the 274 cams. Which mod motor would you go for an all-around Mustang? The one that's going to give you the best performance and drivability is the latest, most powerful version. This would be some kind of Coyote. The LH2 version of the North Star is 100% rear-wheel drive, all-wheel drive. Mine came out of a Cadillac XLR. It was assembled on the Corvette assembly line. Ooh. I've never seen a loss of vacuum issue on comp cams, but I'm a big buck Chevy guy. Love the cam for street NA. I don't understand that. Don't forget about us 3-valve guys. We had a discussion on 3-valve stuff. I did an intake manifold for 3-valve stuff. We've tested ported heads. I've tested cams. I've done a lot of 3-valve stuff. What size turbo would you recommend for a 2.9 liter? Scrolling back. Gene, same answer as I gave you last time. It depends on the power output, but a GT3076 probably for that. Stock Coyote without mods makes mid 400s and also weighs less. Yeah, comparing a Coyote to the previous generation modular Ford stuff, not really even close. The STSV came supercharged, and the CTSV also, right? You had to choose: would you rather boost a 4-cylinder Atlas or a 5-cylinder? Depends on what you're trying to do and where it fits. The bigger motor is always going to make more power. It's going to have better boost response. Pro-charger system on a stock motor. Yes, we did meet for the first time at a family reunion. What temps do these 4.6 like to run boosted? We run them at 140 on the dyno. Plumber, I would think that a Caprice with an LT1 would be better than a 4.6 Ford. Storm just rolled through, lost power, using the last 5% of the battery to Ross Richard. See, that guy gets points for that. He knows how to use his power wisely. Have they had any luck finding Calvin Studebaker? I haven't heard from Calvin to see if they did. Have you ever used a Hellion kit for modular Fords? I have used a Hellion kit on a Coyote, and it worked well. I think that they do good stuff. I'd not tried one on a 2-valve or 3-valve or 4-valve, though. Davidson. Oh, you think the Windsor plant caught on fire? That's why they had to move over? I just don't understand why they would make... I mean, why would you make different front cover bolt patterns and different valve cover bolt patterns? So different heads, basically, with different valve cover bolt patterns. I mean, why wouldn't they share the technology? I don't understand how... Because that's more expense. I mean, that's way more money to do it that way. Nice how cheap Crown Vics and 2-valve Mustangs are. But the cams are not cheap, that's true. 4-valve stuff even more so. Have you ever tested Todd Warren camshafts? I haven't. I don't know who that is. You talk about gapping rings. Do you gap them all the same, or is it different for the different rings? I gap them the same. I grab the top and the second ring the same. Do you know the specs on the 3800 cam that you had custom ground? Yes, I do. But it's top secret. Mostly meaning that I don't remember now. I'd have to look in the box and see. Have you ever tested a Toyota V8? I have not. Jesse, I was looking back, but for some reason, all of your things seem to be, your comments seem to be removed. So I don't know about I don't know what motor this is in, a Chevy, a Vortex Smallblock Chevy. I don't know what intake you have. I don't know what heads you have. I don't know anything about the motor, anything else about the motor, except the camshaft that you have. Today I had a 4.6 burn, 1.78 gallons per mile. Not sure what the horsepower was on the fuel consumption. The carbon buildup on the ECM was lost sitting at 50 miles an hour. Every 1,200 miles it carboned up. What is carboning up? The spark plugs are? I don't know how the ECM gets carboned up. Four-liter inline six against a 4.3-liter V6. I want to see the Toyota 4.6 V8. A Ford versus a Toyota versus a North Star. But don't you already know what the factory power outputs those things are? The Ford Crown Vics were terrible, except every one of them. The trans would go between 80 and 100,000 miles. Richard, for the 4.3 liter, there are two versions of the motor, the Romulus and the Tonawanda. The biggest difference is the individual cam bearing placement and the piston and counterweights. They have the same issue. They made two different 4.3s at two different plants. I have a question for everyone. What is the shipping fee from Australia to the East Coast? I would think it would be a lot, right? Somebody asked me about shipping a cam to Australia. I don't know about that. Carbon on the O2 sensor and spark plugs. This water in the motor to clean them. Are you sure you're getting carbon on the O2 sensor? And that's not burning oil? But yeah, water injected in there will clean it. Got a 5.3 LS. I'm redoing the heads and going to get the rings for a turbo. Should I replace the internals with forge? It depends on what your budget is and what your desire is, and how much power you want to make. You've seen on this channel that with ring gap, the stock stuff properly tuned will make a lot of power. So I don't know what you're trying to make, but if it's like 600 or 700 horsepower, I wouldn't do it. I would just run the stock stuff. How good are PI heads? Porting necessary for 550 wheel horsepower. It's not necessary if you're adding boost to that. No law against third cousin. No, we're not in any way related, although other than kind of by marriage. Well, to be fair, we don't know what a North Star and Toyota would do with locked out VVT. You want to make 500 horsepower NA on a stock 462L head without a power adder? Yeah, no, that's what I said. If you're running a turbo, that's fine. Oh, you plug the extra hole in the timing cover. Is there only one? I can't remember. I know that the valve cover was different by quite a bit, but I don't remember. I didn't remember the front cover stuff. Mark was always really good at that. He paid attention to a lot of that. That's why it's nice to get wrecking yard motors, because when you get a wrecking yard motor, you get everything. And so all the little things are there that you would potentially have problems with. Looking to make 600 wheel horsepower with a turbo, I would just put ring gap on the stock stuff. It'll be fine. The only way we can get the rings before boost would be with a worn out motor with a bunch of blow by. The 5.3, I posted a video today on adding 200 horsepower to an NA motor with no boost. And so his heads, cam and intake and things. And that motor has some blow by. and has since I got it. If you owned a 462 valve motor, would you just run boost? 71% saying yes. How high would you spin the factory 2-valve crank? We made a lot of pulls to 6,500. That's the crank is not going to get hurt there. We ran because with the Vortec, it keeps making power with boost, so you just keep revving it. Non-forged 2-valve crank shouldn't go above 6,500 RPM. Why is that? Why do you think that that's going to let go? I've never seen somebody break a crank. I've never seen somebody break one under power. And I don't think I've seen somebody break one from revving it too high. Especially in this kind of range. I mean, you just look at what we do with the LS stuff, and I know that a 4.62 valve crank is different, but I don't know that that's going to be the limiting factor for RPM. If you look at the Sean Highland book, you're not supposed to make over 400 horsepower with the stock rods. We know that that's not true by 50 or 100%. There's a lot more aftermarket parts available for the 3800, and I really want aluminum heads. They're hard to find, but they would be good. Do you have a book on 4.62 valve motors? Yeah, it's not specifically on 4.62 valve motors, but it's on modular Ford motors. I'll show you what the cover looks like. I have one of them. In fact, I don't even have a regular copy of this, but this is what there goes my camera. There we go. This is what the 465 or Ford, and I don't know why. I fought with them on the title of these books, and this is what they wanted. I'm thinking that they did it for, I don't know, for Google searching or something. But it covers most of the motors. This is early on, so not a lot of 3-valve stuff, I don't think. But every chapter broken down into a different sub-segment thing. So there's one on, air intakes. There's one on headers and exhaust. There's one on supercharging, one on turbocharging, one on nitrous, blah, blah, blah. I saw 2.4 split itself in half. A 2.4 K series? Seen diesel guys with near stock power but stupid high rev limiters break cranks all the time. I don't really follow the diesel crowd too much. A 3-valve Mustang with rounds at what's KD on the hill, Jet? I'm not familiar with that. I must not be hip enough. Doggies are wrestling. Arden, I don't understand the fuel consumption thing. What are you? Tell us what you're doing. Were you making boosts? Were you racing? What were you doing? The gas 2V crank is missing the center counterbalances, so it has second or third order vibration issues at extremely high RPM. Have you ever seen any OEM data to see what's going on there? I mean, normally what we would do is put the steel Cobra crank and stuff if we thought we were making lots of power or running RPM, but we did a lot of stock stuff. Still thinking the 4.3 Vortec is a good idea to work on optimizing. I'm not a fan of blow through carbs though, so it'd be nice to see port injection intake for that platform. I agree. I'm going to do a little search here. 4.3 liter EFI intakes. $250 for a Q-Jet. Merc Cruiser V6 4.3 liter MPFI intake manifold. That's $900. That's sorry, dude. I'm not a buyer for that. .3 liter V6 marine intake. It's kind of cross rammy, I guess. That would be a little easier to put a blower on there. Does anybody have one of those 4.3 liter V6 marine manifolds? Well, I guess I could just get the Vortec upper is different than that, huh? But can I run fuel injection inside the manifold? Let's see. Yes, I could, it looks like. Very cool. Recommendations for intake manifold setup. I think Nick, I think guys are using the Edelbrock one, the Victor deal. No prep race, okay. Australia has way more 3800 cars than we do and have rear-wheel drive 3800s too. If the spiders weren't as big as small children, they do have some bitey stuff over there. See the guys on Power Nation degree the cam with a wheel. And is that necessary? Do you do it on every cam swap? I haven't done it on any cam swap, and I don't agree that it's necessary. And and if I was building a motor, a dedicated motor, then I would do that, and have done that on 4.6.2 valve and 4 valve stuff when we've degreed the cams on each side because they were off from the factory. But 99% of the people out there, when they buy a camshaft, they just put it in dot to dot and it goes where it goes. All they're trying to do is make sure that the cam that they got goes in and the cam is what it's supposed to be and where it's supposed to be. I would say way more times than not, you're doing that and you're just determining that the cam went in correctly. What supercharger can I put on my 4.6.2 valve Lincoln Town Car? I don't know about that application. Andy, why do your posts keep disappearing? Aaron, what's going on? Did you get my message, Aaron? Just sitting at 50 miles an hour going down the road with O2 sensors and plugs, badly carbon up the 4-inch 409 SS pipe at the rear end. It's now a gold color. Okay. Have you ever done a breakdown of a turbo install, like what everything does? No, because I've never done really a turbo install on a vehicle. So that would be different than what I do on the engine dyno. Almost every time. I mean, very rarely do I ever put a kit on there. Sometimes I have, but usually it's me making something work that I've made because it makes it easier to dyno test. So I don't do a breakdown on every piece because it's not something anybody else is going to have. It's only stuff that I have. Showed my buddy the low buck truck video to go with his cam. Very cool. Haven't heard you say anything on universal 4-barrel EFI setups. You mean the throttle body with the injection on them? I'm not a fan. Would you just run an older style small block 350 timing cover on a Vortec 350 to run a double roller timing chain? I don't know if you can. Can you do that? Are the bolt holes in the same spot? I don't think that. I think a Vortec with the plastic timing cover, and think that that's what they have, right? If I remember right. I thought that the front cover is different too. 4.3 liter marine manifolds are like hen's teeth. I've been looking for about 5 years now. Do automatics 4.64 valves have weaker cranks than the manuals? Or do they not have the steel crank on those? No more YouTube, Nick? Stroked LS3, 650 horsepower, 103 or 112 millimeter throttle body. Both would be drive by wire. Well, what size is the opening in the intake manifold? I've been thinking of how I can put piston oil squirters in the North Star. Eagle makes forged 4.6 cranks that missing the middle counterweights and they hold plenty. Aren't there still a lot of 4.6 steel Cobra cranks laying around? Richard, have you thought about what, if anything, happens for 300,000 subscribers? Honestly, I haven't even looked to see what it is recently. Doing all this work, I noticed there was coolant in the oil. That's never good. Should I take you to the shop and have it checked for cracks? There's a way to do it at home. How can I confirm it was a head gasket? There are that you can do a block test on it, and there are things that you could put in there to kind of see. 4.6 Big Bang should be the 300K special. Have you done any testing between traditional coil spark ignition to a plasma ignition? I've never tested a plasma ignition that I can remember. But like all of the ignition things, I don't see how it's going to be beneficial if there's not a misfire situation, if it's not curing a misfire situation. So you ran a Kenny Bell on an 03 Mustang, headers and exhausts, made 9 pounds, ran on the road course, no problems, put the factory exhaust manifolds back on, and it hurt 2 pistons. So my question is, did it hurt 2 pistons because you had already hurt them from all the stuff beforehand, or did the tune change dramatically between those two? You think of anything with the headers on it that it should be leaner, but I don't know. For the throttle body question, it would be a single plane manifold with an adapter plate to mount the drive-by-wire throttle body vertically. You can't go wrong with a bigger throttle body. It's not going to hurt you in any way, other than possibly tip-in drivability, but not for power. It's not going to hurt you. Yeah, Jamie hit some high boost on that deal. Would there be difference in power on a hydraulic flat tap and a hydraulic roll if they have the same specs? Yeah, lift and duration specs wouldn't tell you the ramp rate of the cam. So the ramp rate of a hydraulic flat tap and a hydraulic roller are definitely going to be different. So the cams are going to be different. Only you can see the official number. It's 298 and change. Okay. So if you own a 462 valve motor, would you just run boost? 73%. So we'll close that out. Excuse me, we've got one more minute. Frosty beverage. Are cooler fans worth the hassle of setting up for a supercharged engine oil feed motor? 90% street driven, 10% street driven. I don't know what you mean by cooler fans. Are do you have, first of all, do you have some sort of heat exchanger for this oil that you're talking about? And do you have it in front of the radiator where the radiator fan would be drawing air through it anyway? Boosted Mach 1 auto for ADA driver broke his crank. Okay. Like I said, I haven't seen somebody break one where I wouldn't attribute it to something else. Rusty on lunch at work in Australia. Glad I caught some of it. Freezing cold here in Australia. It is cold over there? It's hot over here. Although it's saying it's only 78 now, so that's actually pretty nice because the sun's going down. My thinking on the benefit to a plasma ignition is it creates a larger initial flame front and much larger, so exponentially faster growth of complete combustion, so less timing is necessary. I've heard all of the theories of all these things, and so there's I haven't tested plasma, so it'd be interesting. I'm always up for testing stuff. But I hear that kind of description for plug gaps and indexing and multi-spark plug electrode things for all that stuff. Oh, yeah, it gets out into there much faster and expands and it does all that. I'm like, look, I want all that to happen. But when the thing initiates fire and you have flame travel and propagation and how fast all of this is happening and it doesn't misfire, I just haven't seen stuff like be better. Will this Comp 469 cam Y6 have vacuum for brakes? I don't know. It's a pretty good sized cam. Maybe you've covered a bit, but any word on the wrong cam shirts? They're supposed to be here tomorrow. It's supposed to be here Monday, and I can start shipping them out. –8 degrees Celsius and wind gusts of 25 miles an hour. It's a wind chill factor. Australia has opposite seasons to the northern hemisphere. I like hot weather, so I'm good. What is the ramp rate? That's how aggressively the lifter follows the cam up. If you look at the lobe like this, I'll show you what ramp rate is. This is a camshaft. And so if you look at the lobe, how steep this is and how steep it goes from the base circle up to the maximum lift, because you can get here a lot of different ways. If you got maximum, if that's your lift, if that's the, let's see, I can get this here. So if that's, you can see the lobe there. So if that's your maximum lift, how you get there is the ramp rate. Do you get there quickly? Do you get there slowly? And on that note, it is time to go. I got a little spider trying to crawl on me. It is time to go. I will see you guys all tomorrow. Milo. Milo's barking.